more than ever, it's important for Christians and Jews to build bridges of cooperation and understanding between our faith communities. Together, we can greatly bless Israel and the Jewish people.
I believe Israel needs the support of evangelical Christians as never before.
Blow the trumpet in Zion, Zion. Sound the alarm on my holy mountain.
Hello, I'm Ted Pike, and this is my wife, Lynn. Today, a foreign government, Israel, operates the most powerful lobby in Congress. This is AIPAC, the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. Through control of Congress, Israel demands and gets nearly $5 billion annually. No elected official dares criticize Israel for fear the Jewish lobby will accuse him of anti-Semitism, the kiss of death for any politician. The president also knows what Israel wants, Israel gets. To act otherwise is political suicide. The mass media, founded and controlled primarily by Jews, manipulates the spigot of information out of which heartland America drinks. The message of this contaminated source is, if you criticize Israel, you are anti-Semitic. Be safe. Keep your head down, or you are fair game for being knocked off by the Zionist shooting gallery.
As a result, our president and elected officials are slaves to political correctness when it comes to Jews and Israel. They cannot seriously criticize Israel, especially as the source of Mideast strife and terrorism. They cannot suggest an end of aid to Israel. They cannot even protest Zionist control of Congress.
How did such a small group of people, about 15 million worldwide, acquire such staggering leverage? It was not primarily through financial or media control, or even through political or military agreement. America has become enslaved to Israel because of the strongest of all bonds, religious ones. Theological errors within Bible-Belt Christianity, going back long before modern Israel ever became a state, have made America vulnerable to the most intense Zionist propaganda. Such error has encouraged a love affair between the church and Israel. This has blinded Christians to the atrocities of Israel against the Palestinians.
Consequently, Israel First evangelicals, along with Israel, have worked together to become the two greatest provocations of strife and terrorism in the Mideast. In this video, we will discuss how Judaism and evangelical Christianity have gone so far astray.
First, we will take a long look at Judaism to see exactly how she went wrong thousands of years ago. Then we will consider how she continues to go wrong today, and how the Bible prophesies she will go even more wrong in the future. After that, we will consider how Christianity strayed from the truth almost from the very beginning. We will see how heretical influences, beginning nearly 2,000 years ago, vitally contributed to today's alliance between Judaism and Christianity.
After discussing what is wrong theologically with both Judaism and evangelical Christianity, we will then briefly discuss how innumerable troubles could have been avoided if 100 years ago the Church in America had been true to the Bible. Since departure from biblical truth has led America and the world to the brink of a Mideast Armageddon, it only stands to reason that return to God's law will steer us in the direction of peace. Let's turn now to the history of the Jews. The Bible tells us that the universe was created for one great purpose, to provide a place where free will souls could choose to become friends of God and live forever with Him in heaven. To fail to do that, the Bible warns, is to miss the whole purpose of our existence. Man is free to choose whom he will serve. There are basically only two options. Man can give his loyalty completely to Jesus, who created him, or retain loyalty to himself. As our faithful Creator, Jesus passionately desires that we obey him by loving and trusting him, just as parents want love, trust, and obedience more than anything else from their children. So Christ wants the same. Willingness towards Christ, the Bible calls faith. Without such faith, until the moment of our death, Jesus warned we cannot go to heaven. Christ said, "He who overcomes, I will not remove his name from the book of life." If we are willing to forsake all to follow him, we have been converted or born again. But if we refuse to give all, the Bible calls such rebellion sin. If we sin, not only will we lose our place in heaven, we will also lose courage to oppose evil here on earth. Today the church is weak in the face of Zionist brainwashing and manipulation. This is a direct result of failure to trust in God alone.
Tragically, Genesis tells us that when man was first presented with the opportunity to choose for Christ, he chose instead for himself. He convinced himself that the purpose of life was pleasure. As a result of such rebellion, man and all nature were thrown into confusion. Disease and afflictions of every kind were unleashed upon the earth. By allowing such troubles, Jesus hoped that man, in desperation, might look to him for deliverance. Yet Christ did not leave the problem of salvation up to man. He planned to actually come down to the earth and bring salvation. The penalty for rebellion against Almighty God is eternal torment in hell. Yet Christ intended to die in our place, bearing punishment for all who would trust in him. As a result of man's rejection of his Creator, the world languished in violence and superstition. How could Christ begin to prepare the world for his eventual coming?
He put his moral light within a special tribe of people. They would have the privilege and responsibility of keeping truth alive and making a place for Christ when he came.
To gradually instruct his people, the Israelites, Christ gave them many laws and ceremonies. These were to help them understand the difference between what is right and wrong, sacred and profane. Christ expected every Israelite to give him not just works of the law, but sincere love, trust, and loyalty. His great commandment to them was that they love him with all their heart, soul, and mind. Christ's requirement of obedient faith from Jews all the days of their lives is the same demand he makes of us today. It never changes. In the 16th chapter of Ezekiel, God's chosen tribe, Israel, is portrayed in an amazing relationship with her Creator. She is Jehovah's unique bride among the nations. We are told that Jehovah, who is actually Jesus, chose Israel alone among the nations to become his spiritual wife, to have spiritual relations with him. Yet this passage goes on to describe how Israel prostituted that relationship. She became a spiritual harlot by worshiping other gods. In no less than 86 clear passages in the Old Testament, Israel is pointedly described as a whore. In fact, having been the first to marry God, she became the mother of spiritual harlots. Although many religious systems throughout history have turned their backs on Christ to become spiritual harlots, only apostate Israel is the mother of the principle of spiritual whoredom. Only apostate Israel has mother of harlots branded on her forehead forever.
Throughout the Old Testament period, Christ tried to persuade his harlot bride to return to him. Finally, he came to earth in one last effort to reconcile her. Her response? She had him crucified. So ended the marriage of Christ to Israel. He divorced her and chose a bride composed of believing Jews and Gentiles. After the mother of harlots was divorced from her husband, she became enraged at his new bride, the early church. The book of Acts tells how Jews ruthlessly persecuted and attempted to destroy the church. Yet soon after rebelling against Rome, first in 70 AD, then in 132 AD, the harlot herself was persecuted by the Romans and cast out of her promised land. For the next 1,000 years, Jews dwelt in Babylon, absorbing its witchcraft and occultry. In fact, no other nation, except the modern Iraqis, have lived longer in Babylon than the harlot Israel. From the exile of Nebuchadnezzar in 586 BC to their expulsion from Babylon in the 11th century AD, the majority of Jews lived in Babylon for 1,600 years, longer than they had lived in Palestine. In Babylon, the Pharisees, who had become the uncontested spiritual leaders of the Jews, incorporated many Babylonian perversions into their new anti-Bible, the Babylonian Talmud. In the Talmud, the mother of harlots turned upside down literally everything her ex-husband Jesus had taught her. In the book of Deuteronomy, God warns the Hebrews that if they rejected him, they would become cursed above all nations. Eventually, they not only rejected his law, but crucified the giver of that law. As a result, the Jewish people have been led into a dark and waterless pit of spiritual confusion called the Talmud. For the last 2,000 years, there they have remained under the spiritual authority of the Pharisees, those who masterminded the death of Jesus. 2 millennia of such spiritual darkness is proof that the ancient curse in Deuteronomy still lies heavily on the Jews.
In my book, Israel, Our Duty, Our Dilemma, I detail how Judaism was corrupted by the occult and immoral practices of Babylon. Let's touch very briefly on just one aspect of such depravity, pederasty, or the sexual molestation of children. Today, the greatest rabbis of the Talmud would be locked up as child molesters. Pederasty was deeply entrenched among the most respected Talmudic rabbis. It was taken for granted that the local rabbi could acquire a baby girl at 3 years of age as his sex toy simply by raping her. Here are several passages from many in the Talmud granting such permission. In Nida 45b, a woman asks, "Master, at what age may a woman marry?" "At the age of 3 years and 1 day, he told her. A girl of 3 years and 1 day may be betrothed by intercourse. Rabbi Joseph said, "Come and hear. A maiden of 3 years old and a day may be acquired in marriage by coition. When a grown-up man has intercourse with a little girl, it is nothing." The footnote to this passage says, "Tears come to the eye again and again. So does virginity come back to the little girl under 3 years." Although the Talmud forbids homosexuality among adult Jews, sodomy with small boys is permitted. Leviticus 20:13 forbids sexual relations between men. The Talmud, however, defines a boy under 9 years of age as a minor, not a man. He is excluded from the biblical prohibition. Since the boy is not sexually mature, the Talmud teaches, he cannot throw guilt upon the rabbi who rapes him. Only he who is able to engage in sexual intercourse may throw guilt upon the active offender, whilst he who is unable to engage in sexual intercourse cannot.
It is significant that the pederasty we have mentioned is endorsed by the very greatest rabbis of the Talmud. These include Rabbi ben Zakkai, Rabbi ben Yohai, and Rabbi Akiba. Christ accused the Pharisees of all uncleanness. This may have included child sex.
It is because of such unbelievable darkness and immorality, largely absorbed from 1,600 years in Babylon, that the book of Revelation gave a new name to the harlot of the Old Testament. She is now called Babylon the Great, mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Her chief city, Jerusalem, is also referred to from heaven, not as Jerusalem, but as Sodom in Egypt, a term denoting sexual vice and bondage.